WQEE 99.1 FM The Key, home of Southern Sports and Talk. Noonan, Sharpsburg, Franklin.
Please join us every Thursday at 10:30 for the Connecting Hearts program. We will bring together mentors from our network to give you resources and inspiration on key areas of your life. I am your host, Margie Conway, the Joy Coordinator of Creative Hearts Studio, located near downtown Noonan. Look for us on social media for a continuous stream from your carefully chosen mentors. Again, please tune in Thursdays at 10:30 to the Connecting Hearts program, where we connect the hearts of women to resources, inspiration, and one another.
Hey folks, this is Mark White with The Mark White Show, and you can tune in to The Mark White Show every Saturday from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. right here on Rock 99 WQEE The Key, the home of Southern Sports and Talk.
Tune in Thursdays from 10 a.m. to 10:30 to listen to the Sustainable Brown Girl Radio Show, hosted by me, Ariel Green. Each week, we'll learn ways to be more sustainable in our everyday lives. We'll discuss exciting environmental news, ways to get involved locally, and we'll hear from women of color who are saving the planet in their own unique ways. Be sure to listen to the Sustainable Brown Girl Radio Show every Thursday at 10 a.m.
This is Margie from Connecting Hearts Network. I'd like you to take just a moment and listen to Linda Kirkpatrick explain to you what Family Patterns Matters is all about.
Family Patterns Matter works with youth and their families to help overcome barriers that prevent their success. We meet twice a month with mentoring, tutoring, teaching life skills, resilience, gratitude, and kindness. We also bring music and art therapy. Please visit our website at www.familypatternsmatter.org.
Welcome into Health, Happiness, and Harmony Hour with Dr. Lewis Boynton. Your session has been booked. It's now time for you to tune in here and get positive vibes, great information, and much more. Here is your host, Dr. Lewis Boynton.
Good morning, and thanks for joining us here at Health, Happiness, and Harmony. I'm your host, Dr. Lewis Boynton. Thanks so much for putting up on my little experiment on music therapy. I hope you guys think about some songs you want us to play in February. We're going to try and do it once a month. We're going to talk to each other. We're going to talk about the songs a little bit. And I was just telling Ryan before I got on the show, I've been listening to a lot of old radio back in the 1970s for your morning drive, right? We're going to play some Van Morrison, Into the Mystic. But the interesting thing is that music is an essential part of your sensory experience, and it helps you to process things like emotions. I know a lot of creative people who struggle because they're not really creating things in their life. And musicians, especially when they're out of sync somehow, or they don't feel their creative action happening, and they're not playing their instrument, it becomes kind of a struggle. And a long time ago, several psychologists came up with this idea of using music therapy to help people process, feel, think about emotions, and more we're discovering human beings are emotional, and that's our first thing we go to. And unless we figure out how to access another way of thinking, slowed down, settled, present moment, we kind of lose our cool and do things and say things quite often we don't mean. They're just automatic and defensive, trying to help ourselves stay safe. This has been written about by a gentleman named Daniel Kahneman, and he won a Nobel Prize for it. He came up with these ideas of thinking fast and thinking slow. And he also stated that human beings, although they claim to be rational, logical creatures, they are not, which we all knew if you watched any Star Trek. Captain Kirk wasn't always rational, especially when they had that twins episode, with the evil Spock. That one, those guys were going out. They were way out of control. You know what I mean? But in order to slow things down, and practice being more, I guess, aware of your environment, in control of your emotions. And I know some people just don't want to control their emotions at all. They just want to go, I want to feel something, anything. It doesn't matter if it's negative or positive. I just want to feel. Some people, their emotions are so overwhelming that they just can't process them. So they avoid them. They box them up. They pack them away. They do this thing that we in America are very good at. It's called compartmentalization. I got to get going, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. Something happens. I don't have time. I don't have money. I don't have the effort. I got to keep going, keep going, keep going. Put it in a box, stick it away. 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 And then you get full. Sigmund Freud came up with this idea called psychodynamic pressure. Americans kind of co-opted it from him. But really what he said is if you have so much negative mental energy built up, after a while it's going to hurt what he called your ego and your psychological structures, to the point that if you have some kind of genetic predisposition, which probably 20, 25, 26% of the population on the planet has a little bit of a disposition to have something severe go on. So if you have a predisposition for something and you store up all this negative psychic energy, eventually something's going to happen. He doesn't really say what's going to happen, but for Sigmund Freud, he had two categories. One was neuroses, which are like behavioral, cognitive things that humans do. He treated neuroses. And then he had another group called psychoses. And this one, made famous by Anthony Perkins and Alfred Hitchcock in the movie Psycho, has had a lot of people struggle with understanding what that is. Freud's categories were very broad, non-specific. We didn't have a diagnostic code. And for a long time, people in Freud's profession, the psychoanalysts, which is a whole different kind of science from psychology, which most people don't actually think about or talk about. It's a whole different theory and science that Sigmund Freud came up with to work in this arena of the psychological world, to work within the ego, within the id, and within the superego. The ego is our sense of self. We try to build ourselves every day, unknowingly, automatically. We try to create identities for ourselves. We try to stick in the normal of the world. We try to make things calm and comfortable. Most humans, we really avoid pain, seek pleasure. We like to have a life that's calm and balanced. Most of us, some of us enjoy drama and chaos, but most of us like to have a calm, balanced life with a lot of peace. Freud mostly worked with people who were struggling with these huge amounts of psychic energy that was negative and stored. So much so that it would actually form these unusual behaviors within their bodies. As a matter of fact, his first patient, actually, her name was Anna O. He worked with, she was so traumatized by being her father's caretaker, who was sort of a mean gentleman and a war veteran, that she began to speak a different language, a language she had never been taught. But for some reason, something happened to her, and she was having this behavior. The great thing to hear about Anna O, that if you read the case study in Anna O, you'll think that Anna O will never get better, but the truth is Anna O got better, became a social worker, and wrote papers and was one of the eminent social workers of her time. Although her name was changed for the publication by Freud, Anna O was a success. She was cured through a thing that Freud said was called catharsis. This is the processing of old negative psychic data and then taking that information and figuring out how to understand it, how to take the emotion out of it, and then how to kind of let that energy go through talking about it. And then somehow, miraculously, once it's worked through and processed the way it was supposed to be originally, the body does this thing called memory consolidation or reconsolidation, and it kind of changes the way you feel and think about things. Humans do this every single day. When people step in front of us, sometimes we'll go, man, that guy was a jerk. And then other times we'll go, hey, maybe they were in a hurry. I'm not in such a hurry. It's okay. We can't tell in a given moment or given day how we're going to process emotions unless we have kind of a plan, or maybe even just kind of something that we do, like a habit. And more psychologists and neuroscientists are discovering that there are great habits you can develop using this thing called mindfulness. I talk about it probably a little bit every fifth show or so, because mindfulness is it's a thing that's often misunderstood and overused. You know, when you say mindfulness, people's eyes usually glaze over and they go, what? Mindfulness? I'm mindful that I eat another donut. I'm mindful that I get an extra serving at dinner. I'm mindful of others' feelings. But really, it's a series of practices that you do that could have a lot of benefits for your life. You could do it 15 to 30 minutes a day. So I was just looking at adding a little bit of new kind of things. And one of the things that I got in my mindfulness book, which is really cool, is they have a 15-minute, 5 yoga position wake-up routine. Just something to think about. But it's like a really easy set of maneuvers for beginner yoga people, or for old people like me who might get stuck on the floor and have to use their home alert, you know? I've yogaed and I can't get up. I need a bigger mat because my knees is aching. So the cool thing is that in this a mindfulness book, they've got several chapters, but some great information. One of the articles they put out is they said that mindfulness helps people to not endure as much depression as others. Now that sounds interesting. Can I get a habit in my life that helps me be less depressed? And as a psychologist and whatever I call myself, I have several titles. As a person who reads and thinks about this stuff, I would say there are some things you can do in your life to help you not be as depressed. Even if you have a chemical imbalance and you're on medication, there's still some behavioral and cognitive adjustments you have to make to your perception of the world. Because you could take all the medicine you want and still have a bad habit of communication, terrible habit of thinking in negative cycles, and you could still struggle with depression. And remember, people who take antidepressants, not every medication is going to be effective for every person the same way. This is our struggle, okay? Each person is a different weight. Each person has a different brain weight. Each person has several 100,000 different neural connections than another person. Each person has different experience. Each person comes to see somebody for help for a different reason. So it's a complex thing being human. You know, I was watching this great series again. It's called The Man Who Fell to Earth, and Showtime did it, but they redid the whole story and kind of wrote in some new things, and it's really good. But in episode 6, the alien talks about what's happening to him and how he's changing into a human. And when he does that, he does this really little experiment, and he goes through what are the things that humans go through every day. What are the things that humans do that are different from aliens? And I thought it was just really great. If you ever get a chance to watch that series, The Man Who Fell to Earth, it's on Showtime. If you got Showtime on demand, you can watch it. But check it out, because it's an interesting way to look at the planet from an alien's perspective. In this one episode, it's just like the actor does just a fantastic job of just doing this monologue and talking about humans as a different sort of alien species. And the thing that he said that really caught me is that humans, he said, humans' God is meaning, and humans connect things to meaning all day long. That was really interesting, the way he pointed that out. And I was sitting thinking, maybe that's what we should be doing, but I don't always connect everything to meaning in my day. I don't think chocolate milk, this means something. Or, man, that biscuit at Chick-fil-A was really good. What does that mean? But I think his point is that for us, sometimes in life, we've got to find out why and what and how, who, and when. Sometimes we got to ask questions. And human beings are really good at asking questions. And human beings are really good at doing cool, different things for themselves to make their lives much more complicated than they could be. They also can do some really cool things that make your lives really, really, really full and great. And I'd highly suggest, if anybody really likes the idea of mindfulness, you should go to Barnes & Noble. They have several great they have these little magazines. One of them's called Mindfulness. Another one's called Breathe. And it really helps you to understand what mindfulness is. So, once again, mindfulness is a practice. It originates from the Buddhist practice of meditation. There's different things that you kind of meditate for. There's like spiritual meditations. Like, I don't know if anybody's ever heard this, but there's these great things on Amazon for free, and they go, Om, for like a half an hour with like little bells, and it's like bing, 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 and then there's little waterfalls in the background. That's a more spiritual type of meditation with a mantra. There's a practice in Buddhism called Zen Buddhism. Zen Buddhism is taking a mantra and repeating it over and over again. They make these cool like beads. I wear them all the time. I give them out to my patients, clients, friends. They're called mala beads. The mala beads are exactly 100, and I think there are 108 beads, specially designed to be a representation of the 108 chants you need to get to the place where you're through with your meditation. So a lot of people use them to hold in their fingers. I use them sometimes. I keep them on my wrists and I rub them. It's almost like bringing a fidget spinner. Sometimes I'll take them off and I'll hold them in my hand and I'll count as I breathe. And I say my personal mantra, which is, I'm not going to say it on the air. So, really is that things are good. It's going to be okay. I like to tell myself a few times a day, things are good. It's going to be okay. And this is just a simple way to breathe and practice this little Zen philosophy. The reason why mantras work so well for people is because it helps you to focus on maybe a lesson. Maybe it helps you to focus on just concentrating on a single thing in your day. When there's so many things going around, you just take a break, shut down all the outside stuff, and just one thing at a time. 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 Hey, this day didn't start out so good, but it's going to be better. Why don't you take a slow breath? Why don't you take a slow breath? Breathe. Breathe in. Hold it. Breathe out. A simple meditation, more spiritual in nature. The goal is to try and calm yourself. Helps you really focus. Some people could call that a mindfulness thing. I think mindfulness is a little bit more specific. I spoke to a couple people who really are actual Buddhists, and they say, sometimes the word mindfulness gets overused because people feel like they want to spread the word about it because it's such a great thing. Quite often it's confused with just meditate. And most people are like, meditate? What's that? And then you tell them and they go, oh, I tried that. I fell asleep. And so yes, you do fall asleep when you start meditating. I did it a lot. And as a matter of fact, when I began meditation, I was in a great deal of chronic pain. And I felt like I needed something to help me get through portions of my day when the pain was the most severe. It was usually times after I ate or something else, right? So I started this meditation practice, and when I did it, I would get a really good nap in the afternoon because I would start it with soft music, do like the little instructions, most people have instructions. They're like, breathe, hold, 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 exhale. Does that feel good now? Go to your happy place. Get in your cave. Sit with your spirit animal and build a little warm, toasty fire. And let's take a quick trip down Peaceful River. They give you little instructions. They say, breathe, go into your body, scan your body. Start at the very tips of your toes. And we're going to move up your leg, to your calves, to your thigh. Do you feel any pain? Do you feel any relief? Do you have any aches or muscles? And you sort of do like little body scans and little check-ins with your body. Those are instructional meditations that are really good to start with, And if you start meditating, I would say we always like to get ourselves in a good place when we start meditating. We want quick results as humans. We want results now. If I play a video game, I can beat it in like a month. If I meditate for a month, I may just getting on to the very beginning of the benefits for medication. And according to this mindfulness magazine, meditation, if done in quantity, can help you to grow your brain. It's really great. It can help you to grow your brain. In this article, mindfulness helps to curb depression. They actually say that mindfulness rewires the brain. And they're starting to talk about neuroscience and how neuroscience kind of can be informing us about how mindfulness helps us. And they talk about things. I've talked about these things a little bit on several shows. I think I even did a one show on neuroscience and some of the latest terminology. But it's interesting because when psychology originally started, the only model of the psychic world we had was Freud's, and he had three components: the ego, the id, the superego. Now, neuroscience has come back years later with this advanced MRI, where they study EEGs, MRIs, and things like that. They actually take pictures and scans of the brain. They can measure the size of the brain and photograph it in like slices so you can see interior components of the brain. Freud would have a field day because he used to do hands-on research about neurons and axiom. He was actually kind of a failure at it. He didn't do good. He got fired from the lab. He also was terrible at hypnosis. But he finally found his niche at psychoanalysis and writing these incredibly intricate scientific papers, But mindfulness it says in this article that mindfulness helps to curb depression. And it says, if you're experiencing depression, it's a good chance without treatment, you'll get it again. New research shows that mindfulness works just as well as happy pills. I don't know what happy pill is, but mindfulness works to help you curb your depressive events. Mindfulness works in these three areas that neuroscience talks about. The first one, which is probably the most important component of the brain related to depression, is the default mode network. The default mode network is our habitual, repetitive, ongoing, circular kind of thinking. So your default mode network is in several parts of your brain, including the prefrontal cortex, where you use parts of your brain to help you be creative, to make decisions, to think more logically. When you're in a calm state, when you're very, very relaxed, you can use your prefrontal cortex in a better way because you actually help to turn the other components of your brain down to a lower speed. And sometimes if you really practice in your mindfulness practice, you can actually turn them off and get yourself to a place where you have a very open, creative, relaxed state of mind. Lots of people talk about that after they do certain martial arts. There's this guy named Chemerinsky who wrote about flow states. And these are actually states where you're into something creative or into something you're doing, and you lose track of time. And you are so habitually tuned into it and so focused and so enjoying the thing you're doing that you do it with very minimal effort, and it's all a lot of memory and learning. And it's really a great state. He called it flow state. He said athletes have this. Marathon runners, basketball players, swimmers. He said, and people have this. People who are skilled at a certain thing, people have this ability to get into a flow state. And I think, mindfulness, it helps with depression, but it also helps you to change some of the things you do in your life. And the reason why the default mode network is so important is because that's where your repetitive negative memories come and really get you depressed. Most people with depression, you can ask them, you can ask, are you able to stop thinking about bad things in your life? Are you able to stop that cycle of terrible thoughts? Are you able to tell yourself that it's going to be okay? And their response is no, because for so long, something's been happening, and they never get a resolution. Lots of people originally, when they get depression, if they don't know they have it, they just think they're going to work their way out of it. Most people will endure months, years and years of suffering because they don't want to have that label of depression. Understandably, as therapists, we shouldn't be giving people labels. We should be telling them they are depression or they have depression. We should say the symptoms you have are within the depressive category. We've got to do some further work to see how depressed you are or if you fit into the specific thing. It's going to take a little time. That's what we should be saying. We shouldn't always stamp people with the depression thing. A lot of people do it really quickly because depression is common now. About 26 point something of the population have symptoms of depression. Millennials have tremendous numbers related to anxiety and depression. Generation Z has the highest numbers out of any population in the United States right now of depression and anxiety. So we've got to be aware that this is a curable, treatable, savable kind of ailment. And I don't know if anybody heard, but yesterday the VA announced that it's opening up crisis care for all veterans all over the country because so many veterans are not getting care. This is a great move, but boy, I would not want to work at the VA claims filing check because so many veterans are going to hopefully get help, and so many counselors are going to go, hey, I'm not on any VA panels. What am I doing? And they're going to have to figure out a massive amount of paperwork, which is very exciting for people who like paperwork. But for those of us who don't, c'est la vie. But we need to know more about depression. We also need know more about how to stave it off, The brain spends 80% of its energy in the default mode network. These are the safe things. Usually when you're having a good day, guess what you're doing? You're using your default mode network. I'm going to work. I'm driving the same way. I'm getting gas at the same place. I get my quick trick coffee mug filled up. I go in. I talk to Jasper, who's my friend at my desk. We chit-chat. We talk to the boss. We try to avoid the boss. We do our work. We goof off and play video games. We watch YouTube for a while. Then we clock out and go home. Normal day. 80% of the function is default mode network. This is how I turn on a computer. This is how I log in my password. This is how I do my work. This is how I answer the phone. This is how I talk to people. This is how I get out of work. This is how I skate for lunch for 2 hours. This is how I get home early. This is how I leave work early. All those things. Part of the default mode network. Your habits, your circular thinking. When you get that kind of craving for, I always say this, McDonald's French fries. Although Wendy's says their fries are better. I don't know. Free chicken nuggets at McDonald's today? What? That's great. But you get that craving, and it just keeps haunting you. Same thing with kind of addiction. It's kind of centered around the default mode network. It's once you get the right components turned on or off, you're just like, well, hey, it's morning. I think it's time to go and use. How do I use? How do I use today? How do I use today? What am I going to do today? What lie do I have to tell? What story do I have to tell? How do I get out of this? How do I get out of trouble? Primarily is I'll say anything to get out of trouble because that works for me. And it keeps me using. That gets stuck in your default mode network. That's why addiction's so hard. People don't realize, and they may not know, but they think addiction is intentional sometimes, and the things people do are personal attacks against them. And sometimes that may not be true because sometimes people are getting high a lot, don't know what they're doing. You know, they're not fully in control of their faculties. They're operating on an automated process, which is survive at all costs. Human beings have that. It's an amazing thing. The only way you actually get to feel it is if you're very, very close to being very, very close to ending it. You know, addicts feel it when they get really, really down and out. They get multiple drug offenses or multiple DUIs, or they're all alone. They have no one left. The people in their life are usually people who are maybe not the best of friends because they use with them, you know? Addiction gets to be very lonely because you have to tell certain stories that are not true. It's hard to understand and trust the environment and people around you. And then when people discover that your stories are not true, they want to get revenge or hurt you too because you hurt them. So it's a long and drawn out process with addiction. And it's primarily you using your default mode network, your salient network, which is another component of the neural structure. And you kind of shut down what's called the executive function. Now, all that in mind, let's go back to mindfulness. Mindfulness helps you connect to probably the most logical part of your brain. It's called the executive functioning network. This is the component that was the last to evolve in humans. These parts of the brain are the parts of the brain we use to recall past decisions, think through new decisions, try to understand what we're feeling, try to reflect, and imagine what it looks like to do the right thing, to be the right way. If you don't have any of those components, you can get those components by practicing some things that I'm going to talk about. And they're simple. They're not very difficult. Humans are built to practice mindfulness. It's kind of weird, but we're built to space out and daydream. We're built to imagine. I just read a new paper that says the imaginal reflexive components of the brain help us to develop intrinsic or internal processes like intrinsic motivation. Now, why is that so important, Dr. Boynton? Because intrinsic motivation is key to all healing in the therapy process. You've got to find something that means something. Going back to the human beings need meaning, it's got to mean something to you as an individual that is important enough to get you to see your own errors, to help you to shift and correct and change the blueprint of your life, to change the story, as we say in narrative therapy, to change the chapter in your life, to look at everything you've been doing so far. Okay? To make a list, whatever, make a mental note, and then to try and shift your processes to make it better in your life, more positive. The interesting thing is that you can do this. Everybody does it. Everybody does it. We all do it every single day. Usually when we get tired, we do it, you know? Usually we'll just get worn out and then we'll go, okay, I'm going to make it through another 10 minutes. I got 10 minutes till I check out of my work zone. 10 minutes. So for the next 10 minutes, I'm not going to think about stressing out. For 10 minutes, I'm going to close my eyes, turn my light off, shut my office door, and I'm going to think about things that I like to do. Simple, mindful meditation. And then I'm going to see this is the important part about mindfulness. I'm going to see what pops up when I try that. What kind of thoughts come out? What do I do when I try this? That's the key in mindfulness. Mindful means looking and being aware of you and what you're doing. It's a reflective process in which you use some physical attributes like your breathing and your concentration to sort of slow the body down so that you can start a balance or a slowdown or a reflective or imaginary process. And by doing this, you're using components of your brain that don't normally get used in that way. But they also, it's kind of like an exercise for your brain. Believe it or not. Your brain is a physical object. It's not quite like a muscle, but it does have this thing called kindling effect. The kindling effect means the more you feel emotion, the more you think about something, the more you create a pattern, habit, whatever you want to call it, you know. What do we call it in evolutionary psychology? We call it a maladaptive behavior or an adaptive behavior. The more you do that, it builds a thicker sort of root, a more easily accessible root. So if you're sad all the time, it's easy to be sad. If you're happy all the time, it's easy to be happy. If you're mindful, it's easier to be mindful the more you practice. It becomes a part of your day. You'll find yourself taking breaks to think about what's going on today. Why am I so tired? Why do I feel so off? And then you look outside and go, maybe it's because there's not a lot of sun. Maybe it's because it's cloudy and gloomy. Maybe it's because I stayed up late last night watching episodes of The Man Who Fell to Earth. Maybe it's because I'm not exercising enough and my body is telling me you're getting weaker. You should make a New Year's resolution to exercise. Whatever it is, when you're working on mindfulness practices, you have the ability to get to a place to think about the good and bad things you're doing. It's not easy to do at the first time, the second time, or the third time, and you really have to actually participate in active use of it. And I know, who's got time to take 15 minutes to meditate? Isn't that a waste of time? Well, if you practice mindfulness, I would just say you can actually make better use of your time, even though you may take breaks to meditate during the day, to maybe do some light exercise, maybe walking or gardening or walking your dog or brief yoga stretches or stretches for sleep, or, you take a break in the middle of your day and you make sure things are going okay. You check in with your own brain sometimes in the day. I personally have a little massage chair. It's set for 15 minutes because at 15 minutes with a massage and nice music, I can do a nice little meditation, schedule out my day, figure out what my tasks are going to be, and then try to work through some of the things that I'm going to be doing for the day. Sometimes I'll think about people I'm going to see. I'll pull up their story in my brain computer, and I'll think about what am I going to try and do in the session? What's my point? What am I going to do? Where am I going to get today? How am I going to help this person? And for me, that works just great. I mean, I found that mindfulness helps me to, when I'm practicing it fully, it helps me to reassess and realign things in my life. Sometimes I can't always do it. I have a chronic illness, and sometimes my fatigue is so bad that I just space out and forget. But more than not, nowadays I've developed a habit where I kind of miss not having the relaxation space, and I miss the intensity of that. And I've tried to turn some of my mindfulness practices into different kind of things that I can fit into my very packed schedule. And one of them is active mindfulness. And this is something I really believe that the monk Thomas Merton didn't get enough credit for. But in the 1960s, he was actually writing to Buddhist monks and writing to monks all over the world, trying to figure out what their spiritual practices were. He wrote books on it. He wrote fantastic guides to this thing he called it contemplative prayer, which is just sitting in your spiritual life and praying over and over and over the same prayers. Something that his sect of monks did. They're called Trappist monks, but it's very mindful. But the thing that he wrote a book called New Seeds of Contemplation, and he talked about the monks getting up at 6 in the morning and going to work. He said they would get up, they would go and do this thing called Vespers, which is related prayers, and for Catholic monks, they pray for the world to have peace, and the world to be good, and the world to be safe for everyone. Catholics and non-Catholics, they pray for everyone. And then they go and they work. Part of their commitment is, number one, they can't talk. Number two, they just work, and they work and make money to hold the monastery so they can be in service to God, so they can fulfill their commitments and their vows, their sacraments. They do all their sacraments except for one, which is marriage. So he said, I noticed that these monks in the field working have a calm peace about them. And he said, I asked them, and they said they do this little thing where they pray in their head, and it helps them to get through the day. And I thought, hey, that's just like a mindfulness thing. You know, you kind of do this little repetitive activity, you kind of calm yourself down, you do a little physical movement, and later on in the book he talks about it. He goes, it's kind of like an active meditation. And I think we can do that mindfully. We can have active meditations. We take our time to, focus our energy on the present moment. We try to understand, maybe on a walk, out in nature, maybe near the water, what our connection is with this place. I remember having a very mindful moment last summer, walking over the Brooklyn Bridge right around dusk, okay? So we had gotten some cameras, and we were right in the middle of the bridge, and I'm talking with somebody who's been in New York forever and was there during 9/11, and he told me this little story, and I just felt this great connection with him because he was about the same age as me. We're actually in the same profession. We kind of grew up in the same way, but I was living somewhere else and he was living there. And I thought to myself, wow, if I was here, I would have felt the same exact thing. I had a really mindful moment. I thought, man, what a great person. I'm so glad I'm here. I'm really grateful to be here on the Brooklyn Bridge in June on a beautiful night, buying $2 bottled water, walking across the bridge, trying to get myself to a good space. And it was fantastic. And I loved it. And it was, mindfulness is this like really, you have it because the feeling you get is very calm, very peaceful. You don't feel the stress coming on. You feel even, balanced, well. It's a hard thing for us to attain sometimes in modern times because we're bombarded by messaging, media, emails, work, social life. But if you can take 10 to 15 minutes a day to clear everything from your mind, and then sort of just practicing letting it out slowly and not grabbing onto anything. And by that, I mean not attaching to something. Attaching is simply just focusing on it. Usually people attach to fear, anxiety, tasks, or the stuff that they just built a habit for. Because when you calm down and you relax and you open up your default mode network, you never know what's going to come out. Sometimes it's just great and sweet and smooth, memories of the past. I'm so happy. Everything's so good. Life is really good. I'm going to be okay. And then sometimes it's like stress. This is happening. This is happening. This is going to be bad. Bad thing, bad thing, bad thing, bad thing, bad thing, bad thing, bad thing. The difference is when you're in a mindful state, when all that comes out, you can go, oh, wow, that's not true, all of that. Some of that is me adding on to the urgency, so I'll get stuff done. Maybe I could pace that a little better so I don't freak out. Maybe I could do a little quicker, or I could just spend 15 minutes on that thing, see if I can get it done. That's usually what a mindful thought is. A non-mindful thought is, I gotta go, I gotta stop, I'm stressed out, I'm anxious, it's never gonna get done, I'm never gonna get this done, it's gonna cost me a lot of money, it's gonna do. Usually it's fast, rapid thoughts, your heart rate goes up, you don't feel good, you're worried about things, and it makes your life a lot more difficult, okay? So when you're working on mindfulness, you can't always attach to what comes out of your brain, because sometimes your brain's just firing off automatic stuff. Sometimes your brain is firing off stuff that you've boxed up, tried to avoid, tried to get rid of stressful things. If you have trauma in your life, sometimes your body itself gives you a message. Sometimes you can be triggered while in life. But you can use mindfulness to slow things down. You can use mindfulness to observe yourself from a different space. And I know that sounds weird, but with practice, you can say, I'm really off. I'm really tired. What's going on? What do I need to do to bring my energy up or slow my energy down so I can make it through this kind of process of whatever goes on, okay? So I can make it through this process. So I can get to a place where I'm going to be okay. Another thing mindfulness helps you do is sort of survey your environment to see if you can try and get yourself to a place that's going to make you feel as though you are okay. This is where, most of us have a hard time, because the world sometimes gets a little scary. Sometimes the world feels a little unsafe. Sometimes people break our hearts or break our trust, and we don't trust people, so we don't trust our environment. Mindfulness helps us get to a place of safety. Using mindfulness and a little bit of exercise and some really good habits, you can get to a place where you have this thing called well-being. It's not always when you have perfect health, because I have a chronic illness, but every once in a while I get to a state where everything's going to be okay. And I'm enjoying my life so much, it makes me kind of feel like life is worth living. And I think for humans, that's kind of the gift of mindfulness. To get to a place where I call it, some people call it well-being, I call it flourishing, where you can see your past, see your future, but right where you are is great. And it feels like you're in the right place, doing the right thing for the right reasons, and you're finding yourself having opportunities in your life that you never expected would happen. Opportunities to make new friends, opportunities to meet new people, opportunities to go new places, opportunities to see things that you've never seen before. I think one of the most exciting things you could do is travel to a different country and meet the people there as equal people, as people you want to get to know, and just settle in and become part of the group. It used to be like a shishi thing to do, but more and more people just travel for the sake of traveling to get that experience, to find out where things are going. And mindfulness helps you to get there. This article in this chapter is really great. It's got some wonderful things here. It talks about the physical benefits, and it talks about this experiment that a psychologist did. He did this group, and he broke them into straight up science group, and he taught them one group how to do mindfulness stuff, and the other group just stayed the same. And the results were pretty phenomenal. Even in the areas where the brain seemed to get a little bit bigger and the brain seemed to work a little more efficiently for people who practice mindfulness for the period of the study. Whether they do it afterwards, we don't know. But for the period of the study, they did great. And they tried to do things to help them get themselves settled in and get themselves to practice mindfulness every single day. And that was part of the experiment. And they showed that it helped to, according to this, it said parts of your brain grow. I don't know. And then the next article is how to turn mindfulness into a habit. But the data is still being observed. They're doing hundreds and maybe thousands of tests on mindfulness now, because it seems like a new area in which neuroscience is connecting with psychologists to understand, like, hey, this practice is beneficial to mankind. Let's try to see how it's beneficial, and then let's see what the effect is, I do know that all habits should be done with this thing called temperance in mind. And if we manage our temperance well enough, we can moderate how we do it. So then mindfulness becomes a habit that's necessary, not an evil, It's not like I go, sorry, grandchild, I will not be seeing you because I'm mindfully meditating for the next 2 days. Or I am going to be doing a fast for 1 week straight. Or whatever you try to put inside your brain that tells you to do too much and not the right amount. But just remember, if you're practicing mindfulness, you're getting yourself an opportunity to relax, refresh, to gain a new perspective, to work on changing what you call your default mode network into a system that works more efficiently for you. And it also helps you to control some of your automated processes a little bit. Helps you to slow down your emotional responses. Helps you to maybe think about like this, hey, I don't want to say that because it's going to hurt somebody's feelings. Or, hey, that might not be the right thing to say to my boss right now because I'm very upset and I want to get my paycheck at the end of the week. I want to keep my job. So mindfulness helps you to do that. Well, I'm going to end it right there. I'm Dr. Louis Boynton. Thanks so much for joining us. I hope you have a mindful day. Hope you take some time to do some breathing relaxation at the end of the day and let yourself relax and get ready for bed with a little mindfulness meditation and help yourself start your path to a better life. And once again, I'm Dr. Louis Boynton. Thanks for joining us here at Health, Happiness, and Harmony, here at 99.1 WQEE, the place where happiness comes to take a vacation. Thank you.